This game could be a trap game. Can Boston College avoid it? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, we're going to give you predictions. We're going to talk about what BC has to do to win this game. We're going to talk about what's going on with Pitt, because this is a game that quickly is turning into a huge favorite for BC to win this. And of course, on a Friday episode, we welcome none other than Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider. Mitch, how's it going?
By the time you're hearing this, I'm probably eating a turkey sandwich the next day after Thanksgiving. So and future me is doing great.
Yeah. So we're all excited for Thanksgiving here, but we're talking like it is after Thanksgiving, because on Saturday at 3:00, Boston College is playing Pitt in front of at Alumni Stadium with not a lot of students there, because I don't think many are going to be making that return trek. But it's going to be a cold one. But Pitt is a team that is a hurting buckaroo right now. They are missing their starting quarterback, who I don't think has been ruled out yet, but the fact that he was an air cast pretty much rules him out. Mitch, what's going on with the Panthers? And, they're riding a 4-game losing streak right now. You used the term paper tigers to describe Syracuse a couple of weeks ago. How would you describe Pitt?
I would say a paper tiger that got flattened, basically. And if you remember back that Pitt Syracuse game, I said, whichever team comes out of this, I'm going to say they were frauds. And that didn't take long for Pitt to get exposed. I think the next week after that game, they played SMU and got their doors blown off. And they were decently healthy back then. So if you look at Pitt's schedule, they started off with 2 comeback wins against West Virginia or Cincinnati and West Virginia. They were both, I think one was like a 14, that was actually 20 plus point comeback. The next one was 14 points in the fourth quarter. So, that's great and all, but it's like, that's not something you can really sustain, and it's going to come back to bite you. So then you go down your schedule, play a close game against Cal. And like I said, Cal is one of the worst kickers I've seen. They lose that game, they win that game, they probably should have lost it. Next week they play Syracuse. Kyle McCord just hands them the game in a gift bag, so that's fine. And then since then they've got blown up by SMU, lost to the UVA close, lost to Clemson close. Cade Klubnik has that big scramble at the end for them to win it, and then Louisville just destroys them. So the big issue for them is their offensive line is getting really banged up. And last year, they kind of had the same issues that BC had in 2022, where everybody was getting hurt every week, couldn't have the same starting lineup in any consecutive games. This year, they were okay for the first few weeks, and now it's starting to mount. Branson Taylor, their left tackle, who was probably their best lineman, went out after, I think, 7 or 8 games. So then they had to move. So they've moved some guys around, trying different guys at right tackle, especially, and it's just generally not working. And and then obviously losing Eli Holstein, the quarterback, hurts things as he, watching this offense with him at the helm, it's like, okay, this guy's got some stuff, but he's pretty reckless with the ball. And, early in the season, it didn't come back to bite him, and it started coming back to bite him. At one point, a few weeks ago, he had the second most turnover-worthy plays behind Aiden Giles, the quarterback from Michigan State. So he had a lot of plays where he kind of got lucky with scrambling, and then I guess, now kind of stopped being lucky. And then they put Nate Yarnell in, who BC played last year, and he beat BC in kind of a surprisingly good performance from him. But in a few games that he's played in over the last few weeks, he's been, obviously Pitt's 0-3, but he's been, I would say, like mediocre, maybe at best. And again, it's the offensive line being hurt up is not helpful. And this is not, in terms of offense, this is not like any Pitt team that we've seen in the last few years, because they're throwing the ball a ton. I guess it's pretty similar to the Kenny Pickett year in that they're throwing the ball at, I think, the 3rd highest rate in FBS. A lot of deep or intermediate throwing, which is kind of surprising. Not running the ball a lot, using 11 personnel on almost every snap. So it's not your typical Narduzzi offense. Cade Bell, who came over from Western Carolina, has brought this more spread out RPO play action offense that, I'm sure Narduzzi was happy to be winning games, but now I'm sure he's like getting back to his old ways. Like, this is bull crap. We need to get back to running the ball.
Yeah. Now you look at this game. You look at what the trajectory BC is going on. They're winning 2 out of 3. They held their own against SMU. What parts of Pitt are do you think BC can kind of take advantage of?
I think that obviously Pitt's offensive line being an issue will allow BC's defensive line to get some pressure. We've seen them able to do that against teams with struggling offensive lines in Syracuse and UNC last week. BC's pressure rate has been low to inconsistent, but last in those 2 games that they've won against offensive lines that aren't very good or bagged up as well, they're getting a lot more pressure. They're blitzing some more, and they're getting home with sacks and creating turnovers. So that's a huge way. On the other side of the ball, in terms of Pitt's defense, not as much there because it's Pat Narduzzi, it's Randy Bates. Like they're going to have a good defense pretty much no matter what. They're sorry, I just lost my train. Oh, so they're blitzing a ton. They're playing base defense 4-3 at the highest rate in the FBS. They run the most 6-man pressures in the FBS. Quarters at the highest rate. So they're in their bag. They're doing what they always do, but they're just doing it pretty well. It's a weird situation for them because they brought back both their safeties, but almost every other starter is different on the entire defense. The one returning starter they had in the front 7 tore his ACL in the spring, and he returned to action against Louisville, but in a limited role. But everybody else is different, and they're playing surprisingly well. Obviously they're having some struggles as of late, but that hasn't been the primary problem for this team, at least in recent weeks.
I look at this offense, and as you said, Narduzzi must be like it must be melting his brain.
They are, I think, 131st in average time of possession, and the only team with lower than that in the Power 5 is Mississippi State, who's absolutely terrible. And looking at this offense, here's 2 measures that can kind of tell you that they were kind of getting lucky early in the year. So this year, Pitt has 15 fumbles, which is tied for 39th most. They have only lost 3 of those fumbles, which is tied for the 11th fewest, and they are tied for the 9th largest difference between fumbles and fumbles lost. The only other teams in the top 10 that have winning records are Arkansas and West Virginia. I think they're both 6-5. Every other team is like Florida State, Southern Miss, all these terrible teams. The next one, and I told you about this, over the season, 35.7% of Pitt's plays have gone for 0 or negative yards, which is the 20th highest rate. In the month of November alone, that number goes up to the 7th highest at 42.5%. So that offense is just not moving the ball, and they're taking a lot of sacks and negative plays. So, Pitt's defense is kind of playing up to their standard, but this offense is just really starting to fall apart.
I just think Donovan Ezeiruaku, what you just said, must be licking his chops with a broken offensive line.
Yeah, I don't even know who's going to start at right tackle for them. It could be one of 4 players, I think, but I just don't know. And none of them are supposed to start at the beginning of the year, so it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, and I know a lot of BC fans are going to be very worried about a trap game. We have all been traumatized enough over the last 15, 20 years to see enough of these games where you're looking at it going, oh man, Boston College is they got this one in the bag. This isn't even going to be a close one. We're going to talk in a moment about what we think BC has to do to win this and avoid a trap game against a 7-4 team, which is crazy, but this is where it's at right now. BC's a 5-point favorite, according to FanDuel. We'll get into all of that in just a moment. I love going to sporting events. If I can get out of my house and go see a Celtics game, a Bruins game, a Red Sox game, I will do it, and I will do it with using Game Time. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite team play live even easier. It filters out all the fluff so you can show incredible deals on your great seat so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I don't have time for that kind of stuff. So Game Time Picks makes my life a lot easier. And with all-in pricing, you can toggle that up front so you have no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, that's Locked On College, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create a code and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. And I want to also recommend to you, if you're looking for another podcast to listen to, check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. With the playoffs going on, coaching changes, the transfer portal about to blow up, there's so much to talk about every single day. Check out Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, we're back here with Mitchell Wolf of Eagle Insider, and we're previewing the upcoming game against Pitt tomorrow at 3 o'clock at Alumni Stadium. It's going to be a cold one, folks. I see a high of around 33, but game's going to get later. It's going to get below freezing. So bundle up if you're going to this one. Now, Mitch, what does Boston College have to do to win this one?
This is going to come off as a surprise, but I think they actually need to throw the ball well because Pitt is very good at defending the run. And while I think that BC they've been able to run against anybody these last few weeks. They played terrible run defense in Syracuse, a pretty good one in SMU, and a mediocre one in UNC. So, Pitt's been good. They play a pretty different style of defense that is more suited to defend the run. But, until somebody stops BC, I'm just going to keep believing that they'll be able to run over pretty much anybody. So with that in mind, I think with how Pitt plays, with how much they blitz, again, they have I think the fifth highest blitz rate in the country, and they run a ton of six-man blitzes. They're first in how much they use that. BC is going to need to get the ball out quickly and into space because that will allow them to, ideally call the blitz off. They'll have to get defenders back into coverage, and then that will allow them to run the ball a little easier. So that means I think the game is on Grayson James a little. He's got to be aware of the blitz, and he was pretty decent at this against UNC, but they barely blitzed. I think they only blitzed on 12% of his dropbacks. Against SMU, they heated him up with a 40% blitz rate. If Pitt does that on a gamely basis, they're going to do that all the time. So he needs to be able to, navigate that better than he did against SMU, get the ball out quickly to his running backs, his tight ends, his hot routes. And those guys also need to protect if they're staying into pass block. And that's something that the tight ends have been okay. Running backs have been a little more questionable at that. So that's why they've been, I'd say, going on into routes more. But running back pass protection is a little more flexible in tight end because obviously they can go to either side of the formation, whereas the tight end's kind of locked in. On the defensive side of the ball, I think it's kind of the same script. Pitt doesn't run the ball particularly well, and they don't really want to run the ball that much. But I think they need to really take away Desmond Reid, who's Pitt's running back, who's a transfer from Western Carolina, which is where their offensive coordinator came from. He's a very small running back, and he's like 5'8", 170 or something. But he is very explosive, very elusive. They use him a ton in the passing game, especially just on checkdowns. Like they'll just run everybody vertical, and then the quarterback will just dump it off to him. So they need to take away him in the run game and make this offense really one-dimensional, where it's all on Nate Yarnell. In the last few weeks when he started, again, the offensive line is having some issues, so he is taking sacks at a very high rate, taking those negative plays. So if BC takes Reid and the running game out of it, then that'll put the pressure on Yarnell, both literally and figuratively, to handle this offense, and BC's pass rush can then pin their ears back and start getting after him.
Is there anything about Pitt that worries you about this game? Like you're saying, like I know that BC is feeling good about everything right now, and Pitt seems to be falling apart at the seams. Is there anything about their game or player that you're watching going, this might be someone to watch for?
Yeah, so two players. So one is Desmond Reid. Again, really explosive player, can take any run. So if he gets in the second level, he can be gone. And especially in the passing game, he has the most yards after catch of any running back in FBS. Now, granted, he gets a lot of catches, so that's a volume stat, but still, he's first in that. And I think he's sixth. I think he was sixth or seventh overall among all receivers. So tight ends, wide receivers, running back, anybody. He's like seventh in yards after catch. So he's really good at creating that. On defense, Pitt's star linebacker, which is both literally and figuratively, Kyle Lewis. So the star position is your strong side backer, and usually that's called a SAM, but star usually means that they're more over the slot in the apex overhang area. So that's Kyle Lewis, and he is everything for this defense. He's a pass rusher, he's a run stopper, he's drops into coverage. He leads the team in pressures, sacks, stops, and tackles for loss. And he's second in total and solo tackles for the team. So he does everything. He's a guy that BC needs to watch and identify because he's going to blitz a lot. So you need to make sure somebody's blocking him. And I think that what Pitt is going to do is they're going to try to keep him outside the formation so that when BC runs, they can kind of loop him around and flank the run to blow it up in the backfield, because he's a bit of a smaller linebacker at 6'2", 225. So playing him in the box where, he's going to get, Logan Taylor or Jack Conley pulling and hitting him, that's not really his game. So those are the two guys I need to watch. In terms of like schematic stuff, again, Reid's the guy. They've got some other interesting targets in wide receiver Kanata Mumfield and Gavin Bartholomew, the tight end, but they've been a bit inconsistent. Their other receivers have been really inconsistent. So yeah, again, Reid's the guy. And so they need to stop that. And then when BC has the ball on Pitt's defense, again, that blitz game can create some havoc, can create some turnovers. So you just got to play smart. You got to not give Pitt extra possessions with good field position, because again, with their struggling offense, if you give them some easy opportunities, they might be able to convert. Because when this offense is humming and it's working, it does work pretty well. It's a lot of ton of play action, a lot of deep and intermediate in breaking routes in the 10 to 19 yard range over the middle of the field. They love dig routes. They also use that motion that like the Dolphins popularized last year, where they motion a receiver away from the ball to kind of give him a head start as he heads up the sideline. And what that does is that forces the defense to it's like you're taking like a piece of gum and you're pulling it apart and you're spreading it. And then it opens up that middle of the field where you can then attack, because the defense has to respond to the formation expanding.
Got it. Okay. All right. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions on this game. We're going to look at the spread and talk about who we think is going to win, and you're going to want to hear our thoughts on that in just a moment. Get ready to tackle the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you have a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can also do it for NHL, NBA, and as we always talk about here on our Friday show, college football. All right, Mitch, we got some picks to make for the day. So let's look at some of the weekend games. Let's start it off with the Palmetto Bowl. South Carolina and Clemson. The latest odds I have is Clemson -3. Where are you at on this one?
I'll say I've got -2.5. This one is tough for me. If this was in South Carolina and Columbia, I would definitely take them. The fact that it's +2.5 at +100 odds with South Carolina would probably make me take that, especially because Clemson has had a lot of issues with field goal blocks. We got a Beamer on the other side of the ball. That's probably going to play a role in terms of big special teams plays. Clemson might have some offensive line injuries, and Clemson has offensive line injuries. South Carolina has arguably the most dangerous pass rush in all of college football. I'm going to say South Carolina pulls off the upset here.
All right. And speaking of playoff potentially bound teams, let's look at Miami against Syracuse. Miami, I think the odds I have is -11.
-10.5. Sure. Yep.
About 10.5. Yep.
Or 10.5. Yeah. So pretty close. This is a tough one because Miami always plays these games weird. And then I'm going to go with Miami just because they play these games weird, and they like end up covering even bigger. I think last week they ended up covering like a 24-point spread against Wake Forest, and even though that game was close for most of it, ultimately I think Miami still is a good pass rush, and we saw that Syracuse's offensive line can be had. And Miami doesn't really need to worry about stopping the run as much in this game because we see that Syracuse doesn't really care about running the ball. So I think Cam Ward wins the quarterback duel here with Kyle McCord.
All right, and then our last one. I was going to talk about NC State and North Carolina, but with Mac Brown gone, we don't need to talk about that. A weird one where bowl eligibility is on the line, which is crazy given that we're shaking in our boots and we watched Virginia Tech just pound on BC. Virginia Tech, a 7-point favorite against Virginia.
7 points is a lot, and again, things seem to be kind of weird at Virginia Tech. I'm not sure exactly where they are with this, but when I saw them play Duke last week, they were playing. I forget what his first. I think it's Malachi Watson at quarterback, who was their third string quarterback.
Pops.
I don't know how. Yeah,
Pops Watson. He's a Massachusetts kid.
Oh, there we go.
Jeff Hafley didn't want him.
I mean, he is Virginia Tech's third string quarterback, so
That's
what it is. Yep. But I'm not sure if he's playing because Colin Schley is also hurt. I'm not sure what Bashal Tutin's status is. Even though it's at Lane Stadium at night, 7.5 points is a lot. I'm going to go with Virginia here to cover. I think Virginia Tech ultimately wins given that home field advantage, but I think Virginia will keep this one close. And it wouldn't shock me if they pulled off the upset, especially if Virginia Tech's down to their third string quarterback.
So if you want to listen to Mitch's picks, you can get yourself started with and again, it's entertainment purposes only. You get yourself started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On Boston College. This is the Black Friday episode of our show, the final Friday before a regular season game. I can't believe this is game number 12 for the Eagles against Pitt. Let's talk about our predictions, Mitch. And I honestly have not even come up with a score, so I'm going to let you go first.
All right, this one is tough for me as well because I think Pitt does some things well that can give BC issues. They have a very dynamic pass rush. They don't really have, aside from Kyle Lewis, they don't really have a dynamic one guy as a pass rusher, especially on the defensive line, which is usually what you get with Pitt. They have somebody, a Kalijah Cansey and Aaron Donald, a Patrick Jones, some guy who's like a really great defensive line. They don't really have that this year, but again, they blitz a lot. They get a ton of pressure. They get a lot of sacks, create some havoc. I think BC wins 31-24. I think if the defense gets some reinforcements back, if we somehow get Cam Horsley, Cam Arnold, Max Tucker all back, for the final game, this could be Cam Arnold. This could be Cam Horsley's last game for BC. It could be Cam Arnold's last game for BC, especially at home. I think if you get all those guys back, then maybe it's like 31-17. But I think BC wins this one. I think maybe Pitt scores a touchdown late, but there's really just not enough time left to make it matter. BC wins this one. I would say, it's going to be a game for most of it, but I think they win this one, and it's like, okay, that was a good win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a little less. I think, as you said, I'm always hesitant to pick BC against Pitt to score a lot of points. Just like
That's
Pitt
fair.
always' defense seems to always fluster them. And I honestly, this has just set me up to get yelled at again, but I think this might be a game where Grayson James might have a few struggles against a much more stout defense. So I still think BC is going to win handily, but I think it's going to be the defense that holds it down. I think BC is going to score. I'm going to go with like 21 points. I'm going to have them winning 21-10. I think Nate Yarnell, the magic that they had last year, I think Bill O'Brien's a much better situational coach to make sure that kind of letdown game isn't going to happen. I think the defense
we can also keep in mind that secondary at that point, which lost Kari Johnson thanks to the salmon,
one of the worst targeting
salmon out of a river targeting play. They were playing, KP Price is a true freshman. They were playing Victor Nelson. They're playing Jalen Cheek, who hasn't played outside of the Duquesne games. So they were pretty undermanned in the secondary in that game. Not, not that Pitt had a great passing offense at the time, but yeah, that was such a weird game, and they deserved to lose. They didn't play well enough to win, but it's just like, God, how can you let Pete? How can you let this version?
Well, like what, 2-7, 2-8 at that point?
2-8 at that point. Yeah, and I was like, how do you let this team beat you? This is insane. I think after that game, we did call for Jeff Hafley to be fired.
Yeah, I don't think O'Brien's going to let that happen. I think Pitt is heading back towards that direction of like falling apart at the seams. I think Bill's too good for this. I think he's going to have them ready. I just don't know if the offense is enough to just blow them out like they did against UNC. They may score 31, but I'm going to go with like 21-10. I
think keep in mind that they only score was it
34 points?
34, yeah. So yeah, and one of them was kind of a garbage. But yeah, I think they'll be able to move the ball well. I'm predicting them to make another field goal, which is probably a stupid bet. I'm just gonna change it. I'm gonna change it 28-17. We're gonna shift everything down a little bit.
And I'm going to say that Donovan Ezeiruaku has some sort of crazy game too.
Oh yeah. I think he's going to go for 4 sacks because he needs 2 to pass Harold Landry for career sacks. He needs 4 to beat him for most in a single season by BC defender. So with Pitt I have no idea who's going to start for right tackle. I think he's going to stay in the whole game, and they're going to try to go for it with him. So I hope he stays healthy. Please, knock on wood. But they're going to try to go for that record, and I really hope he gets it. That'd be awesome.
It's the last game of the year, and just watching any football is obviously fun, but it might be your last chance to watch Donovan Ezeiruaku in maroon and gold. Watch him. This is a perfect game.
If he's smart, it will be. If he,
yeah. Right. He said this week that he may play, which hopefully there's an agent. Not hopefully, but I'm guessing there'll be an agent that says, no, Donovan, that's probably not the best idea.
Respectfully, I don't need to see him in the Serve Pro First Responders Bowl on some crappy field in January. Or the Pinstripe Bowl. I just don't need to see it. It's fine. Please go make your money in the NFL.
All right, Mitch. let's head out of here. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. Obviously, check us out at Eagle Insider. We'll have the recaps of the game. I will be traveling next week. I'll be abroad, so stuff might be a little late. Getting film might be a little bit of a difficulty, but then we'll get in the off season. I think we'll be doing some fun draft stuff, some stuff with reviewing the stats from this year. Definitely going to do something on kind of just celebrating Donovan Ezeiruaku's awesome year. We go back and just reminisce with some of his best plays and look at some of his stats and how they compare to other players in his position, because he has been he's got to be first team all ACC without a question. And if he doesn't get any All-American honors, I'll be shocked.
All right, yeah, we'll talk. That's definitely some post talk, and we'll obviously I'll be back on Saturday for the post game in the press box. I'll be up there, giving you all the lowdown of what happened, and then next week transfer portal bowl game. There's so much going on. And basketball 6-1. They beat Boise State last night. I talked about that on last night's episode. We'll have to talk some basketball because, of course, if they're winning, you guys want to hear it here. All right. I will be back. You can follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. And for Mitch, this is AJ. Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll see you all again next time on Locked On Boston College, your team every day.